my name's Kim J and I'm a visually impaired chef. I'm also a volunteer for RNIB. Now today I'm going to make one of my favourite cake recipes. It's carrot cake, but it's carrot cake like you've never had before. Nothing like the supermarkets. It's a recipe that I discovered. It was in the 1940s and 50s. I've slightly updated it. It is super moist, well worth trying, and it's got one of your 5 a day. Now the ingredients you're going to need for this carrot cake is vanilla, approximately 1 1/4 teaspoons of bicarbonate of soda, 2 to 3 tablespoons of cinnamon powder. Now you can vary this to taste. A pinch of salt. You're going to need some icing sugar, 230 grams of caster sugar, 230 grams of plain flour, 350 millilitres of vegetable oil, 3 large eggs, 400 grams of carrots, which we're going to peel and grate finely. You're also going to need a handful of pecan nuts and a tub of cream cheese. Now I'm going to use an 18 centimetre round cake tin, which I have greased. You can do this as a tray bake if you want, but for this recipe I'm going to use my round cake tin. Now whilst I'm measuring all the ingredients, I've put the oven on at 150 degrees and I'm going to measure out the flour, which I need 230 grams. Now most people say you're severely visually impaired and I have no central vision and the half of the one eye, bottom half of one eye is missing. So sight is always a problem and reading digital things is always a problem. So how do I do it? Easy. Accessible equipment.
Power on.
And one of these is my amazing talking skills. And as you can see, it does different weights.
Gram, milliliter, ounce, gram.
And it also does liquid. So I'm going to measure out 230 grams of plain flour.
It is 230 grams.
Fabulous, this weighing scale. So I'm going to weigh out all the ingredients and then go to the next step. I have a large mixing bowl and I've got my electric whisk. Now don't worry if you don't have an electric whisk or some kind of food processor. You can do this by hand. It will take you a lot longer, but you can do it by hand. Now I've got the 3 eggs which I've broken up and whisked. I've got my 230 grams of sugar, my oil and my vanilla. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the eggs into the mixing bowl with the sugar, the oil and approximately a tablespoon of vanilla. Now if it's a strong vanilla, go for half a teaspoon or a teaspoon. There we go. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to whisk this up. Now this is not your normal sponge where you're using butter, you're using oil in this case. And it's a much lighter sponge and it holds the carrots very well. Now you've got to whisk it, and the recipes always say things like, oh well, until there's a trail on top of the surface. Now when you're visually impaired, you can't tell if there's a trail on the top of the surface. So what I do is when I whisk it, I know it's time to stop whisking when it's over double the amount that it originally was. I've whisked this mixture for about 5 minutes until it's thick. Now the consistency is almost of a cold custard. It's doubled in size, and for those of you that can see, as I put my spoon around, it should leave like a sort of trail that leaves on the surface. But for those of us that are visually impaired, it's double the size, it's thick and it's creamy. Now I'm going to mix in all the remaining ingredients. Now first of all, I get the flour. Now into the flour I put a pinch of salt. Now this salt is really important. One particular day I was making this recipe for my kids' Christmas fair and I forgot to put the salt in, and an interesting reaction happened, chemical reaction. Parts of the carrot cake started turning green, so speckles of green started appearing. Great for Halloween. Doesn't happen all the time, but every so often it does. Now into the flour I'm going to put in the 1 1/4 teaspoons of bicarbonate of soda and just give that a bit of a stir. Now I've got the cinnamon powder, and that I'm going to put into my egg sugar mixture. I like it quite cinnamony, so 2 or 3 tablespoons for me is brilliant. I've grated the carrots as finely as I can, and I'm slowly going to put a little bit of the carrots in, a little bit of the flour, and then stir. And just keep incorporating the ingredients, stirring gently and mixing them together until it comes together. I've poured the mixture into my cake tin, and it's the perfect amount. Now sometimes, depending on the size of the egg, I get some extra mixture left and I just put it into a bun case, and I'm now going to go and put it into the oven. I've pulled the cake out of the oven, and it's been in the oven for about 1 hour 15 minutes, and I check it by just putting a knife into the centre of it, and when it comes out clean, you know the cake is done. Or if you feel the top, it is nice and firm. With the cake out, I'm going to allow it to cool whilst I start to work on the cream cheese. Now I'm going to make a cream cheese topping. Totally up to you whether or not you want the cream cheese topping or not, but I do love it. It just makes this wonderful cake slightly more luxurious. Now in a large mixing bowl, I'm going to put that tub of cream cheese. And into that, I'm going to put about a teaspoon of vanilla. And to sweeten it, a couple of tablespoons of icing sugar. And I'm going to give that a stir, and then I'm going to taste it. And if it needs more icing sugar, I'll add a little bit more icing sugar. I've beaten the cream cheese, and now I'm going to put this cream cheese on top of this carrot cake and just spread it around. Now if you want, you can slice the cake into half and put cream cheese in the middle, but I always find that a little bit too much, so on the top is fine. Just spread it around and then smooth it across. I've put the cream cheese filling on top, and people always say to me, how can you decorate a cake when you're visually impaired and make it look nice? Well, I always go to my trusted fork. Brilliant thing this, anytime I ice a cake, all I do is I run the back of the fork on the top of the cake, so it kind of leaves tram lines at the top. And that way you don't have to worry about whether or not that icing is smooth or not, or whether there's patches. Just run it across, just remembering where you last ended the fork, and then pecan nuts on top, just to make it indulgent, and it goes really well. I'm just sprinkling the handful of pecan nuts on top. Now if you want, you can use other types of nuts or omit them if you've got a nut allergy. Or sometimes I get an orange peel and I grate it and I sprinkle the orange peel on top. Great for when you have dinner parties. And there we go. My wonderful carrot cake recipe. And even as I'm standing here, I can smell the cinnamon, the cream cheese, the pecans, the richness of the carrots. Well worth trying. Hope you enjoy this recipe. Now you have a recipe for a great dish. But when you're in the kitchen, there are certain safety guides and rules that you should adhere to, and which keeps you safe. Now, one of the things that I do before I start cooking is I make sure that I've got shoes on that are sturdy with good grips. I make sure that there's nothing on the floor that I can trip over, and there are no spillages or liquid or condensation on the floor that makes it a bit of a hazard. Now, before cooking, the first thing that you do, as we all know, is wash our hands thoroughly. And especially when you're dealing with raw meat at every stage, wash your hands thoroughly. It stops cross-contamination. It keeps you and your family safe. When you're using the oven and the hob, know your oven and hob really well. Now, I use tactile markings so that I know exactly what temperature to put the oven on and what setting, so that I've not put the grill on when I should be putting the oven on. Now, with the hob, whenever you're sort of putting anything on the hob, make sure the handle is not sticking out. Now, I like to keep the handle at approximately 10 to 12. And the reason for that is it's not near enough to the unit for you to accidentally knock it off. It is not over another hob which may be on, so the handle's getting hot. So this is the safest position. Now, if you're boiling anything, be very, very careful. Don't fill the pan up too much. And if possible, use the boiler alert, which tells you when that liquid is bubbling away and it's hot, and it keeps you safe. If you're not comfortable with the hob and the oven, use the microwave whenever you can. It's a lot safer. And every time you are taking things out of the oven or from the microwave, because remember, plates and dishes get extremely hot in the microwave, use oven gloves. Now, I like to use thermal oven gloves. They're a lot safer. Don't be tempted to use tea towels or anything else. And they literally go to extreme temperatures, so you're very safe with them. Whenever you cut any food in the kitchen, use safe cutting methods. Keep the blade away from your fingers, so set it a couple of millimeters away from your fingers, and that way you're safe all the time. Now, if you're not confident with a knife, you can use appliances like food processors. Make sure you know how they work properly, and keep safe. And if you're still not confident, ask somebody else to do it. It is better to be safe than have an injury. If you have any cuts or you cut yourself whilst you're in the kitchen, put a plaster on it. And if you have a burn, run it under cold water. And if it's bad, you seek medical advice straight away. Whenever you cook meat, always ensure that the meat is thoroughly cooked, because you know, raw meat will give you food poisoning. Now, the best optimum temperature to cook meat is between 66 degrees and 73 degrees. Use a food thermometer if you're not too sure. They do have talking food thermometers, which you can get quite easily. And you store the meat as soon as you can. As soon as it's cooled down, store it straight away in the fridge and read the advice on storage on the labels.